Princess Lyra stood on the highest balcony of her crystal palace and watched the twin moons rise over the forests of Sylvana. Her long silver hair moved gently in the evening breeze, and her violet eyes reflected the starlight above. She had lived for 300 years and ruled her people, the Sylvani, with wisdom and grace. But tonight something felt different in the air. Beside her feet lay her two dragon companions. Ember was the size of a large horse with scales that glowed like hot coals in the darkness. His eyes were golden and fierce, and small wisps of smoke drifted from his nostrils when he breathed. Frost was slightly smaller, with scales of pure white that seemed to capture and reflect moonlight. Her eyes were ice blue, and when she moved, the temperature around her dropped noticeably. The dragons had been with Lyra since they hatched from eggs 2 centuries ago. They were not pets, but partners bonded to her through ancient Sylvani magic. They understood her thoughts, and she understood theirs without words being spoken. Lyra sensed something approaching long before she saw it. The dragons felt it too. Ember raised his head and growled low in his throat. Frost stood up and spread her wings slightly as if preparing for flight or fight. Then they all saw it. A streak of fire across the purple sky, moving fast and trailing thick black smoke. It was not a meteor. Meteors did not move in controlled descents. This was something else entirely, something made by intelligent hands. The object was clearly in trouble. It wobbled and spun as it fell, and pieces broke off, trailing smaller flames behind the main body. Lyra watched as it disappeared beyond the northern forests, and moments later, she felt the impact through the ground beneath her feet. A distant boom echoed across the land. Without hesitation, Lyra gathered her robes and climbed onto Ember's back. The dragon needed no command. He launched himself from the balcony, and his powerful wings caught the air. Frost followed immediately behind them. Together they soared over the palace and the city below, where other Sylvani were emerging from their homes to point at the sky and wonder what had fallen. The flight to the crash site took only minutes. Dragons could cross vast distances quickly when they wanted to. As they approached the northern forest, Lyra saw flames spreading through the trees. The crash had started a major fire that threatened to consume acres of ancient woodland. She could not allow that. Lyra raised both hands and spoke words in the old language, the language of creation that her people had known since the beginning of time. The flames responded to her call. They bent and twisted away from the healthy trees. They gathered together in a controlled burn that would not spread further. Fire was an element, and elements obeyed those who knew how to speak to them properly. With the immediate danger contained, Ember descended into a clearing near the wreckage. What Lyra saw there made her breath catch in her throat. The object was clearly a vehicle of some kind. It was made of metal she did not recognize, smooth and gray with strange markings along its surface. One side had split open like an eggshell from the impact, and smoke poured from the opening. Lyra slid from Ember's back and approached carefully. The dragons flanked her, one on each side. Their senses were sharper than hers, and they would detect danger before she did. But they seemed cautious rather than aggressive. Whatever was inside this vehicle was injured, not threatening. She heard a sound from within. A groan of pain. Something alive struggled inside the wreckage. Lyra moved closer and peered through the torn metal. In the dim interior, she saw a figure trapped beneath a collapsed beam. The figure was moving weakly, trying to free itself but lacking the strength. The being looked up and their eyes met. Lyra froze in surprise. She had met many species during her long life. The Sylvani had contact with other worlds through their magical gates. But this creature was unlike any she had seen before. It had no pointed ears like her people, no glowing eyes. Its skin was a light brown tone, and its hair was dark and short. It wore strange coverings that appeared to be some kind of protective suit. "Help me," the creature said, and somehow Lyra understood the words. Perhaps her telepathic abilities translated the meaning. Perhaps there was something universal in the plea. Either way, she knew what was needed. She raised her hand and spoke to the metal. It was harder than speaking to fire or water. Metal was not a natural element in the same way, but it had once been stone, and stone remembered the earth. Through that connection, Lyra found the thread of control she needed. The beam lifted slowly, and the twisted panels peeled back like flower petals opening. The creature tried to stand, but its leg was clearly injured. It began to fall, and Lyra moved quickly. She caught the being before it hit the ground. Up close, she could see it was roughly her size, perhaps slightly taller. Its body was warm, and she could feel its heart beating rapidly from pain and fear. "You are safe now," Lyra said aloud, though she suspected the creature could not understand her spoken language as she understood its plea. She hoped her tone would communicate safety. She guided the injured being toward Ember. The dragon lowered himself to make mounting easier. At first, the creature seemed terrified of the dragon, which was understandable. Many beings feared dragons on first sight. But Lyra projected calm and safety through her telepathic gift, and gradually the creature relaxed enough to be helped onto Ember's back. Lyra climbed up behind the injured visitor and wrapped one arm around it to keep it secure. Ember rose into the air smoothly and turned back toward the palace. Frost circled the wreckage, once breathing a layer of ice over the flames to ensure they would not reignite, then followed her brother home. During the flight, Lyra studied the being she had rescued. Now that she was close, she could see more details. It had 5 fingers on each hand like her people did. Its face had 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, arranged in a pattern that was almost familiar yet distinctly different. The protective suit it wore had symbols and markings she could not read. Most interesting was the device attached to its wrist. It glowed with a soft blue light and displayed changing symbols. Technology of some kind, though more advanced than anything the Sylvani typically used. Her people preferred magic to machines, but they understood others made different choices. The creature drifted in and out of consciousness during the flight. Lyra held it steady and pushed gentle healing energy into its body. She could not repair everything, not yet, but she could ease pain and slow any bleeding. The rest would require proper medical attention back at the palace. When they landed in the royal courtyard, several attendants rushed forward. They had seen the dragons return with a passenger and knew something unusual had occurred. Lyra issued quick commands. Prepare a healing chamber. Send for the master physician. Bring water and soft blankets. The servants moved efficiently, though she saw their curious glances at the stranger. News would spread quickly through the palace. The princess had brought back a survivor from the skyfire. By morning, all of Sylvana would know something extraordinary had happened. Lyra carried the creature herself. It weighed less than she expected, and despite its different appearance, it felt fragile in her arms. She brought it to her own private healing chamber. She rarely used these rooms for herself anymore, as Sylvani royalty rarely fell ill. But she maintained them perfectly for occasions exactly like this. She laid the being on a bed of silk cushions. The master physician arrived quickly and began examining the injuries. The leg was broken. Several ribs were cracked. There were burns and cuts across the arms and torso, but nothing appeared fatal if treated properly. As the physician worked, Lyra watched the creature's face. Even unconscious, it seemed to be dreaming. Its eyes moved beneath closed lids, and occasionally it murmured sounds she could not interpret. She wondered what world it came from, what people it belonged to, whether others would come searching. That last thought concerned her most. If this was an invasion force scout, then she had made a terrible mistake bringing it into her home. But her instincts said otherwise. This being had crashed, not landed. It was alone, not part of an army. And when their eyes met in that wreckage, she had seen no hostility, only fear and hope and desperate need. Ember and Frost settled on either side of the healing chamber entrance. They would stand guard through the night. The dragons had their own sense about threats, and they seemed calm. That reassured Lyra more than anything else. The physician finished his work and reported the creature would survive. It needed rest and time, but would heal. Lyra thanked him and sent him away. She would watch over the stranger herself tonight. She pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. Outside her window, the moons continued their eternal dance across the sky. Somewhere out there was the world this being called home. Somewhere people might be wondering what happened to their explorer or soldier or scientist or whatever role it served. Lyra reached out and gently touched the creature's hand. Its skin was rough compared to hers, but warm and alive. She sent another pulse of healing energy into its body, then closed her eyes and waited for dawn. The creature woke slowly as dawn light filtered through the crystal windows. Lyra had dozed in her chair, but her eyes opened instantly when she felt the shift in the room's energy. The being stirred and groaned, then suddenly jerked upright with a gasp of alarm. "Easy," Lyra said softly, projecting calm through her telepathic gift. "You are safe here. You are injured, but you are healing." The creature looked around wildly, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Its eyes landed on Ember and Frost still guarding the doorway and widened in shock. Then it saw Lyra sitting beside the bed and seemed to freeze entirely. For a long moment they simply stared at each other. Lyra took in the details she had missed during the chaos of rescue. The creature had brown eyes that were very expressive, currently showing confusion and wonder in equal measure. Its face was asymmetrical in small ways that made it unique. There was intelligence in those eyes and something else. Curiosity, perhaps. The being reached slowly to the device on its wrist and tapped it several times. A hologram appeared in the air between them, showing images and symbols. The creature pointed to itself, and the hologram displayed an image of a bipedal figure similar to its own form. Then sounds came from the device. Human, the device said. Earth. Explorer. Lyra understood. This being was called a human, and it came from a world named Earth, and it was exploring space when disaster struck. She nodded to show comprehension, then pointed to herself. Silvani, she said clearly. Lyra. Princess. The human's device captured her words and displayed new symbols. It was translating, she realized. The technology was learning her language even as she learned its sounds. Clever. The human pointed to itself again and said, Danny Chen. The name felt strange in Lyra's ears, but she repeated it carefully. Danny Chen. The human smiled and nodded enthusiastically. Over the next hour, they communicated through the translation device in gestures and telepathic impressions. Danny explained that his ship had suffered a malfunction while traveling between stars. Something had damaged the engines and he lost control. He managed to guide the vessel toward this planet, but could not prevent the crash. He asked where he was, and Lyra explained this was Silvana, homeworld of the Silvani people. She described her role as princess and guardian of the realm. She introduced Ember and Frost as her bonded companions. Danny seemed amazed by the dragons. He asked permission to approach them, and Lyra granted it. Danny limped over to where Ember lay and slowly extended his hand. The dragon sniffed carefully, then allowed the human to touch his scales. Danny laughed with delight and said something about dragons existing in Earth legends, but never being real before. Frost demanded equal attention, and soon Danny was petting both dragons while they purred like enormous cats. Lyra found herself smiling. It had been long since she saw someone react to her companions with such pure joy. Most beings feared the dragons or wanted to use them as weapons, but Danny simply appreciated them for what they were. The master physician returned to check on his patient and was shocked to find the human awake and moving around. He examined Danny's leg and declared the healing was progressing remarkably fast. Perhaps human biology was more resilient than expected, or perhaps Lyra's magic had been more effective than she realized. Over the following days, Danny recovered his strength. The palace staff brought him food, and he tried everything with enthusiasm, even dishes that other species found strange. He asked constant questions about Silvani culture and history and magic. His curiosity seemed boundless. Lyra spent hours with him, answering what she could and asking her own questions in return. She learned that humans came from a blue world covered mostly in water. They had only recently developed the technology to travel between stars. Danny was part of the first wave of explorers sent out to make peaceful contact with other civilizations. This surprised Lyra greatly. Most species that achieved space travel used it for conquest or resource extraction. The idea of exploring simply to meet others and learn from them was unusual. She said as much to Danny. He looked thoughtful, then said humans had nearly destroyed themselves with wars and pollution centuries ago. They survived only by learning cooperation and looking outward beyond their own planet. Now they sought friends among the stars, not enemies or subjects. Lyra found this philosophy appealing. The Silvani had long ago mastered their warlike impulses through magic and meditation. They understood the value of peace. Perhaps humans, despite their different methods, had reached similar conclusions. One evening, Danny showed Lyra images from his ship's database. Pictures of Earth with its vast blue oceans and green continents, cities filled with millions of humans living close together, art and music and architecture from thousands of different human cultures. The diversity amazed her. Silvani were relatively uniform in appearance and custom, but humans seemed to celebrate difference. There were images of Earth animals too. Danny pointed out creatures called dogs and cats that humans kept as companions. He laughed and said Ember and Frost reminded him of oversized versions of both. There were birds and fish and thousands of other species. Earth was rich with life. Then Danny showed images of human families, parents holding children, elders teaching youngsters, groups of friends sharing meals. The emotions captured in those moments were universal. Love and joy and connection transcended species boundaries. Do you have family? Lyra asked Danny. He nodded. Parents and 2 siblings on Earth, a brother and sister. He had not seen them in over a year since beginning his mission. He missed them but said exploration was his calling. He needed to see what existed beyond his home world. Lyra understood that feeling. Even though she was responsible for governing Sylvana, she sometimes yearned to travel beyond her own planet's boundaries. She had visited a few nearby worlds through magical gates, but human technology allowed them to go much farther. "What is your purpose?" Danny asked her one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. Amber and Frost trailed behind them, playing their eternal game of chase. Lyra considered the question. "My purpose is to protect my people and preserve our way of life, to maintain balance between the natural world and civilization, to ensure future generations inherit a world as beautiful as the one given to me." Danny nodded appreciatively. "That is a noble purpose. Very noble." They sat on a bench beneath a flowering tree. Its blossoms were silver like Lyra's hair, and they released a sweet scent into the air. Danny closed his eyes and breathed deeply, clearly enjoying the moment. "What is your purpose?" Lyra asked him. Danny opened his eyes and looked at the sky above. "To learn," he said simply, "to see what exists beyond my limited experience, to make connections with beings from other worlds, to bring back knowledge that helps humanity grow and evolve, and maybe to prove that the universe is not a cold, empty place but one filled with potential friends." Lyra had never heard anyone express such thoughts. The great empires she knew of cared about power and territory and resources, but humans, it seemed, cared about connection and growth and friendship. It was refreshing and slightly unsettling because it challenged her assumptions. That night, Danny's translation device picked up a signal. He became very excited and showed Lyra the data. Another human ship was searching the area. His people had tracked his emergency beacon and come looking for him. They would arrive within 2 days. Lyra felt an unexpected pang of sadness. She had grown accustomed to Danny's presence. His questions and laughter and different perspective had brought new energy to her palace. The dragons liked him too. They would miss their new playmate, but she was also glad. Danny would reunite with his own people. He would go home eventually and see his family again. That was good and right. She asked Danny what he would tell his people about Sylvana. He thought carefully before answering. "I will tell them I met a wise and kind princess who saved my life," he said. "I will tell them about your beautiful world and your magnificent dragons. I will tell them the Sylvani value peace and balance, and that they would make excellent friends for humanity. And I will ask permission to return if you would welcome that." Lyra smiled. "You would be welcome always, Danny Chen of Earth. You have honored my home with your presence and your respect. Any human who comes in peace as you have will find friendship here." Danny bowed deeply in the human style. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and took Lyra's hand in his. The gesture was simple, but it carried meaning. Contact between beings, connection across the vastness of space. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. You showed me that kindness exists beyond Earth, that intelligence comes in many forms, that dragons are real and amazing. You gave me hope for what this universe can be." Lyra squeezed his hand gently. "You gave me something too, Danny Chen. You reminded me that there are still new things to discover, new perspectives to consider. You showed me that beings can be driven by curiosity rather than conquest. You brought light to my palace." They sat together in comfortable silence as the moons rose. Tomorrow they would prepare for the arrival of Danny's people. But tonight they simply enjoyed the moment. 2 beings from different worlds who had found unexpected friendship in the wake of disaster. The human ship arrived exactly when Danny predicted. It descended from the sky with far more grace than his damaged vessel had shown. This craft was larger and sleek with smooth lines that spoke of advanced engineering. It landed in the great plaza outside Lyra's palace where she had ordered space cleared for the arrival. Lyra stood waiting with Danny beside her. He had insisted on walking without assistance despite his leg still healing. He wanted to greet his people on his own feet, showing them he had survived and recovered. The dragons flanked them both as always, and their presence drew gasps from the humans who emerged from the ship. The first person out was a tall woman with dark skin and close-cut hair. She wore a uniform similar to Danny's, but with additional markings that suggested rank. When she saw Danny, her professional expression broke into a wide smile. She rushed forward and embraced him tightly, speaking rapidly in the human language. Danny hugged her back just as tightly, then turned to Lyra. He gestured between them and his translation device activated. Captain Betty Walsh, this is Princess Lyra of the Sylvani. Your Highness, this is Captain Walsh, commander of the exploration vessel Wanderer. She has been searching for me since my crash. Captain Walsh bowed deeply in the human style of respect. Your Highness, Danny has told me much about you through his transmissions. You saved his life and cared for him with great kindness. Humanity owes you a debt of gratitude. Lyra returned the bow in Sylvani fashion, placing her right hand over her heart. Danny Chen is brave and honorable. It was my privilege to offer aid. Any human who comes in peace as he has will find welcome on Sylvana. More humans emerged from the ship, about 20 in total. They carried equipment and supplies clearly prepared for various possibilities. Some appeared to be medical personnel. Others were scientists with scanning devices. A few looked like security, though they carried no visible weapons. Captain Walsh introduced several key members of her crew. There was Lisa Park, the chief medical officer, who immediately wanted to examine Danny. There was Kevin Wright, the head scientist, who could barely contain his excitement about meeting an alien civilization. There was Tony Hernandez, the engineer, who hoped to study Sylvani technology. Each human showed genuine enthusiasm and curiosity, rather than suspicion or hostility. Lyra invited them all into the palace. She had prepared a great hall for the meeting with tables arranged for discussion and refreshments from Sylvana's finest kitchens. The humans marveled at the crystal architecture and the floating lights powered by magic rather than technology. Kevin Wright in particular kept pulling out devices to scan everything while murmuring to himself. They sat together and talked for hours. Captain Walsh explained that Earth had detected Danny's emergency beacon and immediately dispatched the nearest ship to investigate. When they arrived in the system and received Danny's messages about Sylvana, they were thrilled. First contact with a peaceful alien species was everything the exploration program hoped to achieve. Lyra asked about Earth and human civilization. Captain Walsh showed holographic displays of humanity's homeworld. Lyra saw vast cities filled with billions of people. She saw oceans that covered most of the planet's surface. She saw variety in human appearance far greater than anything among Sylvani. Different skin tones and facial features and body types all considered equally human. This diversity fascinated her. Sylvani were uniform with silver hair and violet eyes and pale skin, but humans came in endless variations. Captain Walsh explained this was the result of humans evolving in different regions of Earth, adapting to local conditions over thousands of generations. Only recently had they unified into a single global civilization. The captain spoke of human history both triumphant and tragic. Wars that nearly destroyed their species, environmental damage that almost made Earth uninhabitable, but also great works of art and music and literature, scientific discoveries that unlocked the secrets of their universe, acts of compassion and heroism that showed the best of what humans could be. We learned from our mistakes, Captain Walsh said. We nearly lost everything before we understood cooperation and sustainability. Now we explore space not to conquer but to learn. We seek friends, not subjects. We hope to find others who might teach us wisdom we lack. Lyra found herself deeply moved by this honesty. The captain did not try to hide human flaws or pretend her people were perfect. She acknowledged failures while celebrating successes. This humble confidence impressed Lyra more than boasting would have. Kevin Wright asked permission to study Sylvani magic. He wanted to understand how they manipulated elements and communicated telepathically. Lyra agreed but explained magic was not easily analyzed by technology. It required attunement to natural forces and years of training. Still, she would allow him to observe and record what he could. Lisa Park examined Danny thoroughly and declared his recovery remarkable. She asked what treatments Lyra had used. When Lyra explained her healing magic, Lisa became very interested. She wondered if magical and medical approaches could complement each other. Perhaps combining both would achieve results neither could alone. Tony Hernandez was most interested in the dragons. He asked dozens of questions about Ember and Frost, how they flew despite their mass, how they breathed fire and ice, whether they were intelligent or simply well-trained animals. Danny laughed and said the dragons were definitely intelligent and possibly smarter than humans in some ways. Ember seemed to enjoy the attention. He performed small demonstrations, breathing precise streams of fire to light candles across the room. Frost created delicate ice sculptures that she presented to different humans like gifts. The crew was enchanted and several asked to touch the dragons. Both Ember and Frost allowed it, seeming pleased by the admiration. As evening approached, Captain Walsh raised a delicate subject. She asked if Sylvana would be interested in establishing formal relations with Earth, an exchange of ambassadors perhaps, opportunities for cultural and scientific sharing. Humanity would love to learn from Sylvani wisdom while offering their own knowledge in return. Lyra considered carefully. Such a decision affected her entire world, not just herself. But she had seen enough to believe humans meant what they said. They sought friendship, not domination. And Sylvana could benefit from new perspectives and technologies. I believe this would be beneficial, she said finally. But I must consult with my council of advisors. This is too important a decision for one person, even a princess. Give me 3 days to discuss this with my people's representatives. Then I will have an answer. Captain Walsh nodded, understanding. That is wise and proper. We will wait as long as needed. In the meantime, perhaps we could learn more about each other informally. My crew would love to see more of your world if you permit. Lyra smiled. You are welcome to explore, Sylvana. I will assign guides to show you our cities and forests. You may speak with any citizens who wish to meet you. See for yourselves what we are, and decide if you truly want friendship with us. Over the next 3 days, the humans dispersed across Sylvana with Sylvani guides. They visited the crystal cities where buildings grew from the ground, through a combination of magic and careful cultivation. They walked through ancient forests where trees had stood for 10,000 years. They met farmers and artists and teachers and children. Everywhere they went, they asked questions and shared stories about Earth. The Sylvani people were initially wary of the strange visitors, but the humans' genuine interest and respect won them over quickly. Children especially loved the humans and followed them everywhere, asking to hear stories about Earth animals and human games. The humans proved endlessly patient, entertaining the young ones and teaching them simple human words. Meanwhile, Lyra met with her council. The 12 advisors represented different regions and aspects of Sylvani society. They debated the human proposal intensely. Some feared contamination of their culture by outside influences. Others worried humans might not be as peaceful as they appeared. But most recognized an opportunity for growth and learning. Lyra shared everything she had observed about Danny and his people. She spoke of their humility and curiosity, and their willingness to acknowledge past mistakes. She noted how Danny had treated her as an equal, despite differences between their species. She mentioned the human philosophy of exploring to make friends, not conquer territory. The council voted. 10 members supported establishing relations with Earth. 2 abstained, wanting more time to study the humans. None voted against. It was enough. Sylvana would open formal diplomatic channels with humanity. On the 3rd evening, Lyra invited Captain Walsh and her senior crew to a special ceremony. The Great Hall was filled with Sylvani citizens come to witness history. Lyra wore her formal robes of state silver cloth that seemed to capture and reflect all light. Her crown of crystal rested on her silver hair. Ember and Frost stood beside her throne in their full majesty. She announced the council's decision. Sylvana would welcome Earth's friendship. They would exchange ambassadors and share knowledge freely. They would help each other grow and learn. This marked a new era for both their peoples. The humans cheered. The Sylvani raised their voices in a traditional song of welcome. Music filled the hall, blending human and Sylvani sounds into something neither had created alone, but both found beautiful. The Wanderer departed 3 days later, carrying most of Captain Walsh's crew back to Earth, with news of successful first contact. They took with them recordings and samples and stories that would change how humanity viewed the universe. But Danny remained behind as promised, along with 2 assistants, Lisa Park and Kevin Wright, who would help establish the first Earth embassy on Sylvana. Lyra provided them with a wing of the palace for their quarters and workspace. The rooms were airy and bright, with windows overlooking the gardens. Human furniture was brought from the ship to make them more comfortable. Within a week, the space had transformed into a blend of human technology and Sylvani aesthetics that somehow worked beautifully together. Danny threw himself into his role as ambassador with enthusiasm. He spent mornings learning Sylvani language and customs from tutors Lyra assigned. His afternoons were devoted to meeting citizens and local leaders, building relationships across the planet. Evenings he often spent with Lyra, discussing philosophy and sharing stories from their different cultures. Lisa Park established a small medical clinic where she combined human medicine with Sylvani healing magic. She worked closely with Sylvani physicians, learning their techniques while teaching them about human biology and treatments. Soon, beings from both species were benefiting from this collaboration. Injuries that would have taken months to heal now recovered in weeks. Diseases that had no cure before yielded to combined approaches. Kevin Wright was in paradise. He studied Silvani magic with the dedication of a devoted student. He learned that magic was not supernatural but rather a deep understanding of natural forces. Silvani had learned to perceive and manipulate the fundamental energies underlying reality. It was science just approached from a different angle than human physics. He shared human scientific knowledge freely in return. He taught Silvani engineers about electricity and computers and space travel. Some Silvani found technology cold compared to magic, but others became fascinated. A group of young Silvani scientists formed around Kevin, eager to learn everything he would teach. The blending of cultures accelerated. Human music found fans among Silvani who appreciated the emotional range of genres from across Earth. Silvani, art with its flowing organic forms, influenced human artists who began incorporating similar aesthetics into their work. Children of both species played together, inventing games that combined human and Silvani rules. Lyra watched all this with satisfaction. She had hoped for peaceful coexistence, but this was something more. True cultural exchange, both sides learning and growing and creating new things together. It exceeded her expectations. Her relationship with Danny deepened as well. They spent more time together than protocol strictly required. They took long walks through the forests with Ember and Frost trailing behind. They discussed everything from the nature of consciousness to the best way to cook various foods. They laughed together, often finding humor in the differences between their species. One evening, Danny asked Lyra about Silvani approaches to relationships. He had noticed Silvani seemed to form partnerships that lasted for centuries given their long lifespans. He wondered how they maintained such bonds over so much time. Lyra explained that Silvani chose partners carefully. They did not rush into bonds because they knew those bonds would last. When two Silvani connected deeply, they performed a bonding ceremony that linked them telepathically. After that, they could sense each other's emotions and thoughts to some degree. It created intimacy impossible to break. She asked Danny about human relationships. He told her humans bonded through marriage, but the connections were more fragile. Many marriages ended in separation. Human lifespans were much shorter than Silvani, only about 80 years on average. So they had to make choices faster and accept more risk. Do humans bond with beings from other species? Lyra asked the question carefully, unsure if she wanted to know the answer. Danny looked at her with those expressive brown eyes. I do not know, he said honestly. We only just met other intelligent species, but I believe love transcends physical form. If two beings connect deeply enough, if they understand and value each other, then why would different biology matter? The important part is the connection between minds and hearts. Lyra felt something shift inside her. She had been wondering about this very question but had been afraid to voice it. Silvani rarely formed bonds with other species. It was not forbidden, but it was uncommon. She had lived 300 years and never felt drawn to anyone from the handful of other species she had met. But Danny was different. His curiosity and kindness resonated with something in her. His laughter made her happy in ways she had not experienced before. When he was away for a day, she found herself looking forward to his return. These were not the feelings of a host for a guest or a ruler for an ambassador. They were something deeper. Over the following weeks, Lyra found herself testing Danny subtly. She introduced him to other Silvani, especially young, attractive ones, to see if he preferred them. But Danny treated everyone with the same friendly respect and kept returning to spend time with her. She asked his opinion on important decisions, even when she did not need advice, just to hear his thoughts. Danny seemed equally drawn to her. He asked questions about her life and really listened to the answers. He noticed when she was tired or stressed and found small ways to help. He brought her gifts, flowers from the forest or interesting stones he found. Simple gestures but meaningful. Ember and Frost watched all this with knowing eyes. Dragons understood bonds better than most beings. They had bonded to Lyra as hatchlings and knew what deep connection felt like. They approved of Danny clearly. The way they followed him around and sought his attention spoke volumes. One night, Lyra could not sleep. She wandered to the gardens and found Danny there sitting on a bench looking at the stars. He smiled when he saw her and made space beside him. She sat, and together they gazed upward in comfortable silence. Do you ever regret staying? Danny asked eventually. Do you wish you had gone back to Earth with the others? Lyra considered the question. No, she said. I miss some comforts of home, but I would not trade this experience. I am learning so much. About your people, about my own people, about myself. This feels right somehow, like I am where I am supposed to be. Danny nodded. I feel the same way. When I left Earth, I thought I would explore briefly and return. But now I cannot imagine leaving Sylvana. Everything I discover here fascinates me. The magic, the culture, the beauty of this world. And he paused, then continued more softly. I would miss certain people too much if I left. Lyra felt her heart beat faster. Which people, she asked, though she suspected she knew. Danny turned to look at her directly. You, he said simply. I would miss you, Lyra. More than I should, probably. You are not just a diplomatic contact or a friend. You are someone I think about constantly, someone whose happiness matters deeply to me, someone I want to spend time with every day. Lyra felt heat rise in her face, a Sylvani blush. She had not expected him to be so direct. Humans apparently did not share Sylvani tendency towards subtle, gradual courtship, but his honesty was refreshing. I would miss you too, she said. More than is proper perhaps for a princess to admit to an ambassador. You have become important to me, Danny Chen. When you are away, I count the hours until you return. When you are present, I feel more alive. I do not fully understand these feelings, but I know I do not want them to end. Danny reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm and rough compared to hers, but the contact felt natural. Can Sylvani and humans form bonds, he asked. Is such a thing possible between our species? Lyra thought carefully before answering. I do not know of any precedent. Our peoples have only just met. But I believe anything is possible if both beings want it enough. Bonds are about connection between minds and souls. Bodies are just vessels. If our minds and souls connect, then perhaps a bond could form. Danny squeezed her hand gently. I would like to try, he said, if you would. I know we are from different worlds with different biologies and cultures. I know there will be challenges. But I think what we have is worth exploring. You are remarkable, Lyra. Wise and kind and powerful and beautiful. I have never met anyone like you. Lyra felt tears form in her eyes. Sylvani rarely cried, but strong emotions could trigger the response. You are remarkable too, Danny. Brave and curious and compassionate. You see wonder in everything. You treat all beings with respect regardless of their status. You make me want to be better than I am. I would very much like to explore this connection between us. They sat together, hands joined, looking at the stars. Two beings from different worlds contemplating a bond that had never existed before. It was frightening and exciting in equal measure. Ember and Frost emerged from the shadows where they had been watching. The dragons approached and settled on either side of the bench. Frost rested her head on Danny's lap. Ember nuzzled Lyra's shoulder. Both dragons purred their approval. Danny laughed. I think they are giving us their blessing. Lyra smiled. Dragons are wise. They understand bonds better than most. If they approve, then perhaps we should trust their judgment. What happens now? Danny asked. The seasons changed on Sylvana, and with them the relationship between Lyra and Danny deepened. They spent nearly every day together, balancing their official duties with personal time. Danny learned to speak fluent Sylvani, and Lyra became comfortable with human customs. They taught each other songs from their worlds. They cooked meals together, blending Sylvani and human recipes into new dishes that became favorites among the palace staff. The physical differences between their species proved less challenging than expected. Sylvani and humans had similar biology in most ways. Both needed oxygen and water. Both felt pleasure and pain. Both expressed love through touch and words and acts of service. The details differed, but the fundamentals aligned. Lyra introduced Danny to Sylvani meditation techniques that allowed non-telepathic beings to quiet their minds and perceive energy flows. Danny proved surprisingly adept. Within months, he could sense the magical currents that flowed through Sylvana. He could not manipulate them as Sylvani did, but he could feel them. It gave him a deeper appreciation for how Lyra perceived reality. Danny taught Lyra about human science and technology. She learned the principles behind computers and engines and communication systems. She found technology fascinating in its own way. While magic worked with natural forces, technology reshaped matter itself. Both approaches had value. Both expanded what was possible. They traveled together across Sylvana, visiting cities and villages. Everywhere they went, they were welcomed warmly. Citizens had accepted their unusual pairing, and many found it inspiring. If a Sylvani princess and a human could bridge the gap between their species, then perhaps anything was possible. Danny sent regular reports to Earth through the communication systems Lisa maintained. He described the success of cultural exchange and the deep bonds forming between their peoples. He mentioned his relationship with Lyra, honestly knowing it would cause discussion on Earth. But he believed transparency was important. The response from Earth was overwhelmingly positive. Humans were romantic by nature, and the story of an ambassador falling in love with an alien princess captured imaginations. Artists created paintings of Lyra and Danny. Musicians wrote songs about their bond. Children played games pretending to be the princess and the explorer. Captain Walsh sent a personal message congratulating Danny and offering her support. She said his relationship with Lyra represented the best of what first contact could achieve. Not just diplomatic cooperation, but genuine understanding and affection between species. She joked that he had set the bar very high for all future ambassadors. As their first year together approached its end, Lyra and Danny began discussing something more permanent. They both knew they wanted to formalize their bond. But how to do so in a way that honored both their traditions was unclear. Silvani bonding ceremonies involved telepathic linking. The two partners would open their minds completely to each other with the assistance of a bonding master. Their thoughts and emotions would merge briefly, allowing them to know each other at the deepest possible level. If they still chose to bond after that experience, the connection would remain partial but permanent for the rest of their lives. The problem was Danny was not telepathic. He could not open his mind the way Silvani did. Lyra consulted with the oldest bonding masters, asking if there was a way to include a human in the ceremony. They were unsure. No one had tried to bond with a non-telepathic being before. Kevin Wright suggested a technological solution. Humans had developed neural interface technology that allowed computers to read brain activity. Perhaps they could create a device that would let Danny's mind connect with Lyra's during the ceremony. It was experimental and risky, but theoretically possible. Lyra brought this idea to the bonding masters. They were skeptical of using technology in a sacred ceremony, but they were also curious. Magic and technology were just different ways of manipulating reality. Perhaps they could work together in this case. They agreed to attempt it if Danny was willing to accept the risks. Danny did not hesitate. "Whatever it takes," he said. "I want this bond with you, Lyra. I want to know you as deeply as possible and let you know me the same way. If technology can bridge the gap between our different biologies, then I am grateful for it." Kevin and Lisa worked with the bonding masters for weeks, designing and building the device. It was a delicate headpiece embedded with sensors that would read Danny's neural activity and translate it into something approximating telepathic signals. The bonding masters would then use their abilities to merge those signals with Lyra's consciousness. No one knew if it would work. The technology had never been tested for this purpose. Danny might feel nothing, or he might be overwhelmed by sensations his brain was not designed to process. There were dangers, but both he and Lyra were willing to face them. They set a date for the ceremony 6 weeks away. The time was needed for preparations and also to allow both of them to prepare mentally. Opening oneself completely to another being was terrifying even for Silvani, who were trained for it. For Danny, who had never experienced telepathy, it would be even more intense. Lyra spent hours teaching Danny meditation techniques to calm and focus his mind. He needed to be centered during the ceremony, or the experience might scatter his thoughts dangerously. Danny practiced daily, sometimes for so long that Lisa worried he was overdoing it. But he insisted he needed to be ready. They invited guests from both Earth and Silvana. Captain Walsh returned on another ship bringing Danny's family. His parents and siblings had not seen him in over a year, and were overwhelmed to find him healthy, happy, and in love with an alien princess. His mother cried when she met Lyra and hugged her tightly, welcoming her to the family. His father shook her hand formally, then pulled her into a hug as well. The ceremony was planned for the largest hall in the palace. Hundreds of beings would attend: Silvani nobility and common citizens, human diplomats and scientists, delegates from other species who had heard about the unprecedented bonding and wanted to witness it. The hall was decorated with flowers from both Silvana and Earth. Musicians from both species would provide accompaniment. The night before the ceremony, Lyra could not sleep. She stood on her balcony looking at the stars, wondering if they were making a mistake. Not because she doubted her love for Danny, but because she feared what might happen if the technology failed. What if the device hurt him? What if his human mind could not handle telepathic contact? What if she lost him trying to bind herself to him? Danny found her there. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and held her close. "I am afraid too," he whispered. "But I am more afraid of not trying. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Lyra. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that." Lyra turned in his arms and kissed him. They had kissed many times over the past months, but this felt different, more intense, like they were sealing a promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright. Lyra dressed in traditional bonding robes made of silver cloth that seemed to flow like water. Danny wore formal human attire, black with silver accents that Lisa had designed to complement Lyra's robes. Kevin helped him put on the neural interface device, adjusting it carefully to ensure proper contact. They entered the great hall from opposite sides as tradition demanded. Lyra walked with Ember and Frost at her sides. Danny walked alone as humans did. They met in the center where the bonding master waited. She was ancient even by Silvani standards, having performed bonding ceremonies for over 500 years. The ceremony began with traditional songs. Silvani voices rose in harmonies that seemed to resonate with the crystal structure of the palace itself. Then human voices joined, singing melodies from Earth. The two musical traditions blended unexpectedly well, creating something more beautiful than either alone. The bonding master spoke about the nature of bonding, about trust and vulnerability and permanent connection. She acknowledged this was an unprecedented ceremony, joining beings from different worlds through a combination of magic and technology. She asked both Lyra and Danny if they entered this bond freely and with full understanding. Both answered yes. The master instructed them to kneel facing each other. She activated the neural interface on Danny's head. Lights flickered across the device as it began reading his brain activity. Then she placed her hands on both their heads and began the telepathic merge. Lyra felt Danny's consciousness touch hers tentatively. It was strange and foreign and beautiful. His thoughts did not feel like Silvani thoughts. They were more chaotic and emotional and wonderfully alive. She felt his love for her like a warm wave. She felt his fear that this might not work. She felt his wonder at experiencing telepathy for the first time. She opened herself fully, letting him see everything. Her 300 years of memories. Her responsibilities and doubts. Her loneliness before he arrived. Her joy at finding someone who understood her. She held nothing back. Danny's mind reeled from the flood of information. Lyra felt his consciousness stagger under the weight of centuries. But he steadied himself through the meditation techniques she had taught him. He breathed through the overwhelm and let himself simply be present with her.